It was a Tuesday evening in late October when my life took a turn into the abyss. The day had been unremarkable, a tedious shift at the office, followed by a quick stop at the grocery store for some instant noodles and a loaf of bread. As I stepped out of the store, the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly escalating into a torrential downpour that turned the world into a blurry gray watercolor. I cursed under my breath, realizing I'd forgotten my umbrella at home. Pulling up the hood of my thin jacket, I made a dash for the bus, stopped just down the street. The rain was relentless, soaking through my clothes and chilling me to the bone. By the time I reached the shelter, I was drenched, my shoes squelching with every step. The bus stop was one of those old-fashioned ones, a simple bench under a rusted metal awning that offered little protection from the wind-driven rain. A flickering streetlight cast an eerie, sallow glow over the scene. I checked the schedule taped to the post. The next bus was due in 15 minutes. Shivering, I sat down on the damp bench and watched the rain hammer the pavement, creating a hypnotic rhythm that almost drowned out the distant rumble of thunder. As I sat there, a strange sensation crept over me. The streetlight flickered violently, plunging me into momentary darkness before sputtering back to life. In those brief blackouts, I could have sworn I heard whispers, faint, indecipherable murmurs that seemed to emanate from the shadows around me. I shook my head, attributing the unsettling atmosphere to my overactive imagination and the dreary weather. But then, as another peal of thunder echoed through the night, I saw a pair of headlights cutting through the rain-soaked darkness, approaching from the direction where my bus usually came from. At first, I felt a surge of relief. An early bus, I thought, grateful for the chance to escape this increasingly unnerving bus stop. But as the vehicle drew nearer, that relief curdled into unease. This wasn't my usual bus, and as it drew closer, something felt off. It was red, a deep arterial red that seemed to absorb the feeble light rather than reflect it. The bus slowed to a stop before me, its brakes emitting a high-pitched squeal that set my teeth on edge. For a moment, it just sat there, engine idling with a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the ground and into my bones. I stared at it, transfixed. There was no route number displayed, no destination, just that unsettling red gleaming wetly in the rain. Then, with a pneumatic hiss, the doors swung open. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to wait for my regular bus. Before I could take it all in, "Last bus," came a voice from within. It was gravelly, deep. "You getting on or not?" The bus service might have been suspended due to the heavy rains, I thought to myself. But the rain was getting heavier still. A sudden gust of wind sent a spray of icy water into my face. Overwhelmed by the desire to be somewhere, anywhere else, I stood up and approached the open doors. The interior was dimly lit by a single bare bulb that swayed with the bus's movements. The seats were upholstered in the faded, worn-out fabric that might once have been burgundy. But what struck me most was the smell. A cloying mixture of mold, wet leather, and something else. Something coppery and organic that made my stomach churn. "Where's this bus headed?" I called out to the driver, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet interior. The driver didn't turn around. He was an old man, or at least I assumed he was from the hands gripping the steering wheel. He wore a cap pulled low over his face, shadowing his features. In the same gravelly, deep voice, "It goes where it's needed," he said, "where it's called." I wanted to ask more, to demand a straight answer, but something in his tone froze the words in my throat. Instead, I fumbled in my pocket for my bus pass, only to have the driver wave me away with a gnarled hand. "No charge," he wheezed. "Not for this ride." Unnerved, I made my way down the aisle. The bus was empty, save for a lone woman slumped in the back row. It was a woman, middle-aged, her face turned towards the window. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. She's just sleeping, I told myself. She has to be. I chose a seat near the middle, as far from the woman as I could get without being too close to the unsettling driver. As I sat down, the doors hissed shut, and the bus lurched into motion. We drove through the rain-slicked streets, the tires sending up sprays of water that obscured the windows. I tried to track our route, but the landmarks I knew seemed to blur and shift in the downpour. Buildings looked alien and foreboding, glistening eerily through the rain. After what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than minutes, I realized we were no longer in the city. The streetlights had given way to darkness, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning. The road beneath us had changed too. I could feel the bus jolt and sway as it navigated what must have been a dirt track. "Hey," I called out, my fear finally overcoming my reticence. "This isn't my stop. Where are we going?" The driver said nothing. I rose from my seat, intending to force my way to the front and make the driver turn around. But in the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of his eyes, milky white orbs that held no iris, no pupil. They weren't the eyes of something living. Panic surged through me. I stumbled backwards, my hand groping for support. It found the arm of the woman in the back. Her skin was ice cold, with an unearthly chill that seemed to seep into my own flesh. As I recoiled, her head lolled to the side, revealing a face frozen in an expression of fear. A quiet gasp escaped my lips as I looked around and realized she wasn't alone. In the seats I'd thought empty, there were others. Men, women, children, all slumped in unnatural poses. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. "Let me out," I cried, my voice cracking with panic. "Please, just let me out." The driver turned to me then, his face finally revealed. It was a face that didn't belong to the realm of the living, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer that of an old man, but a chorus of whispers that seemed to emanate from the very air around me. "There is no out," the voices said. "Only forward, only where we're called." And then, through the rain-smeared windshield, I saw the scenery outside had disappeared, replaced with nothing but a thick, absolute darkness. I slumped to the floor, my will to fight draining away. How long we drove in that lightless void, I cannot say. Time seemed to warp and stretch, measured only by my own ragged breaths and the ceaseless rumble of the engine. But finally, after what felt like eons, I felt the bus slow and then stop. The doors opened with a hiss that sounded like a dying sigh. "Last stop," the chorus of whispers announced. "Everyone out." But I didn't move. Through the open doors, I saw not a platform or a street, but an impenetrable wall of fog. It was a mist like no other, dense, roiling, with an iridescent sheen that hurt my eyes to look at directly. One by one, the other passengers rose, their movements jerky and unnatural, and stepped off into that impossible fog. They vanished instantly, swallowed by the mist. I remained seated, my hands gripping the seat in front of me so tightly my knuckles turned white. Some primal instinct told me that if I stepped into that fog, there would be no coming back, no return to the world I knew. I would be lost, not just in body, but in soul. "I said everyone out," the whispers hissed, now with an edge of malice. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling but resolute. "I won't go." For a moment there was silence, save for the soft hiss of the fog as it began to creep into the bus. Then suddenly, I felt something grab me. It tugged at me, trying to drag me toward the door. I screamed, kicking out and grabbing onto anything I could reach. The unseen entity pulled harder. I could feel my grip slipping, inch by inch. The fog was up to my waist now, its touch like 1,000 tiny needles against my skin. In desperation, I looked up and saw the driver staring at me through the rearview mirror. His eyes, those milky white orbs, now seemed to hold a glimmer of something. Pity? "You don't belong here," he rasped, his voice now singularly his own. "Not yet." And with that, the doors hissed shut. The fog retreated, driven back due to the doors shutting it out, or perhaps by the driver's cryptic declaration. I woke with a jolt. I was sitting at the bus stop, the same bus stop where this nightmare had begun. My clothes were soaked, my body aching as if I'd been thrown from a great height. Above me, the streetlight flickered, its glow now seeming warm and comforting. The rain had stopped.